Good evening. Never before has the Supreme Court of India asked a sitting CBI director to recuse himself from an ongoing investigation. But today it did. So, does Mr. Ranjit Sinha's continuance, not just in this case, but also as CBI chief, become untenable? That's top of the news tonight. Welcome to the show. I'm Zakir Jacob. Up first, as always, the headlines. It's a big blow for the CBI director. The Supreme Court asks Ranjit Sinha to recuse himself from the 2G spectrum case, and this when he's barely 2 weeks away from retirement. After a fortnight of drama in Hisar, Baba Rampal is finally under arrest. He's remanded to judicial custody until the 28th of this month. Article 370 is once again in the news in Jammu and Kashmir. While the BJP chief Amit Shah skirts the issue, Home Minister Rajnath Singh blames the opposition. Just a week to go for the SAARC summit, and Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif rubs it in. He says Pakistan will not talk to India without talking to Kashmiri separatists first. And there's some hope for Formula One fans. F1 boss Bernie Ecclestone indicates that the Indian Grand Prix could return in 2016. And our top story tonight. 12 days before he was due to retire, CBI Director Ranjit Sinha suffered a major blow to his reputation and to his integrity when the Supreme Court today asked him to recuse himself from the 2G case. The apex court said that the allegations against him of protecting some of the accused in this case appear to be, and I quote the court here, prima facie credible.
In an unprecedented order, the Supreme Court today handed over the 2G scam case to the senior-most officer after current CBI Director Ranjit Sinha. This came after a bench headed by Chief Justice H.L. Datu asked Sinha to recuse himself from the case. The bench, however, refused to pass an elaborate order on the issue, saying it would tarnish the image and reputation of the premier agency.
After hearing all the arguments, the court passed a short order saying that they are not inclined to give detailed reasons for this order because that might damage the reputation of the CBI. But the court said that from henceforth, the CBI Director, Mr. Ranjit Sinha, should not interfere or participate at all in the 2G investigations or the trial.
Today the order has passed a one-line order, basically without commenting on the Director CBI or on the CBI, and said that he should recuse from the 2G trial, primarily because the special prosecutor who has been appointed by the court was not unhappy with the Director CBI in the 2G matter.
The top cop, who is due to retire on December 2nd, has been accused of trying to shield some 2G scam accused. The court observed that apparently all was not well, and seemingly the allegations made by an NGO against Ranjit Sinha had some credibility.
The Bharatiya Janata Party has been a party which has been exposing the truth right from the very beginning. Today also we maintain that all those who are in any way trying to hide the facts from the public should be exposed, and the people have every right to know the truth.
If he is asked by the highest court that he should keep off from the investigation, which is mainly being done by him, he as the leader, so that shows that, the highest judiciary in the country has expressed their dissatisfaction or no confidence in the man who is heading the investigative agency.
By not getting him out of CBI, but only saying you shall not deal with these cases, the court has given him a bigger blow.
The CBI chief's role was criticized by the Supreme Court appointed Special Public Prosecutor Anand Grover after Sinha named a senior IPS officer as the mole in the team. The apex court also recalled its earlier order by which it directed the NGO to disclose the name of the whistleblower who had provided documents and visitor's diary of Sinha's residence. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
So this in many ways goes beyond just the 2G case. It goes directly to the integrity of the man heading India's premier investigation agency, though he has barely a fortnight to go before retirement. Shalini Singh is now joining us here on the news tonight. She's one of the senior journalists who's been tracking the 2G case ever since it broke. Today's order, a very short, brief one-line order, but clearly we have a pipeline situation where the CBI director, the man heading the country's premier investigating agency and also the agency in this case being removed from this particular case. But how can he continue to be the CBI's boss because his integrity is being questioned. Do you believe that his continuance as CBI director has now become untenable in many ways?
I think in more ways than one, it has become untenable. If you remember the 2G case, the CBI first filed its FIR in October 2009, and then it went to sleep. And then when the matter went to the Supreme Court, then the Supreme Court started supervising its performance, which was also extremely humiliating and showed that the CBI had no intention of pursuing the matter with any measure of integrity and efficiency. So despite the Supreme Court wrapping the CBI on its knuckles several times, the CBI did very little. Now, that becomes an issue of efficiency. We didn't openly say that they're corrupt. We said they're inefficient, perhaps they're slow, perhaps they don't have the wherewithal to deal with a complex matter like 2G. Of course, subsequently, that didn't turn out to be the case. But we were polite as journalists. We tried to give them the benefit of doubt. Then people started saying, we started saying that they kowtow to their political masters. But that's not the case now. In this particular point in time, that's not the case. So here now, it's pointing to personal corruption, which is a very serious matter. And I think this is, in a sense, I think when, things get worse before they get better. The CBI has been under public scrutiny for a very long time. And if it's facing this humiliation, I think the only thing that lies ahead is for them to start sort of taking responsibility and actually working for people's respect.
But you have a piquant situation here where the court has removed the top guy in charge of this agency, in charge of this investigation, asked him to recuse himself, and the number 2 in that investigating team will now head this probe. I do understand that Mr. Sinha has barely a fortnight to go before he retires, but you know how the Indian bureaucracy works. You have a piquant situation where the boss has just been chastised by the Supreme Court, and you have the number 2 man asked to lead this investigation. Would it even be possible for a number 2 man to lead an honest, transparent investigation in light of this situation?
You're absolutely right. There are lots of twists and turns and a lot of issues in this CBI investigation which are inexplicable. For instance, there are a lot of people in the Access Services Division of the DOT who actually signed off on several ineligible files. You will remember that the CAG had said there were 85 ineligible files. However, the man who signed off on these files, despite being forewarned by another official, B.B. Singh, actually was turned into what is it called? A chief, what is it? There's a particular word for it.
Okay.
Almost, I mean, very close to an approver.
Okay.
A primary witness in the 2G matter. So now A.K. Srivastav, the man who allowed all these ineligible companies in through the gate, has a special status. Then you have the matter, I think we've all forgotten that, of the leaked tapes where the CBI prosecutor was actually telling Sanjay Chandra, one of the prime accused, how to wiggle out of the matter and giving him advice. So, there's a history to this. So let's not just look at it as Ranjit Sinha. Let's look at it as CBI in toto.
It's a systemic problem.
It's a systemic problem.
We'll have to leave it at that because of the paucity of time. But thanks very much for joining us. Shalini Singh, one of the senior journalists who's been tracking the 2G case ever since it broke, giving us her thoughts and perspective into what happened in court today and what's the way forward for what has become a big, in fact, perhaps the biggest corruption investigation in India in decades now. Let's talk about some of the other stories that we're tracking on the news tonight. It's been a day of swift developments in the case of the self-styled godman Rampal. The Haryana police today slapped charges of murder and violence against him. They even formed an SIT to probe this case, and they made as many as, get this, 469 arrests. The Punjab and Haryana High Court today, in fact, remanded Rampal to judicial custody till the 28th of this month. It also cancelled his bail. That's in connection with a separate case, a murder case back from 2008. The next hearing will be on the 28th.
Self-styled godman Rampal being produced in court. The Punjab and Haryana High Court cancelled his bail in a murder case registered in 2006 after a clash at his Rohtak ashram resulted in the death of one person. The bail was cancelled after it was made clear that Rampal had been arrested in a contempt of court case. Rampal had disobeyed High Court directives for appearing before it, citing ill health.
देखो इसका डिफेंस नहीं, ये सच्चाई है कि वो पहले बीमार थे और वो खुद कैप्टिविटी में थे, खुद बंधक बनाया हुआ था उनको, इसलिए वो कोर्ट में पेश नहीं हो पाए, वरना तो मैटर कुछ नहीं था, कंटेम्प्ट, क्रिमिनल कंटेम्प्ट थी, कोर्ट में पेश होते नोटिस ही हुआ था, कोर्ट का शुरू में नोटिस ही था, कोई नॉन बेलेबल वारंट नहीं थे.
He was arrested from his ashram in Barwala in Hisar district last night. Rampal underwent a mandatory medical test at a government hospital in Panchkula in the morning, where all his health parameters were found to be stable. During the next hearing, the Haryana police chief has been asked to file an affidavit detailing the operation that led to his arrest regarding arms and ammunition in the ashram and loss of property.
खंडपीठ ने चीफ सेक्रेटरी हरियाणा को भी निर्देश दिया है कि एक एफिडेविट रिपोर्ट दायर करें जिसमें रामपाल की सारी प्रॉपर्टीज के बारे में कोर्ट को इंफॉर्मेशन दी जाए.
Followers coming out of Rampal's Barwala ashram say they had been held hostage by him and his henchmen. Clashes between his supporters and security personnel on Tuesday left over 200 injured. 6 persons, including an infant, had also died, and the cause of their death was being probed. Haryana police has also ordered setting up of a special investigation team to probe certain cases against Rampal. Over 35 fresh cases, including that of sedition, have been slapped against the 63-year-old godman and his followers that include his key aides. Bureau Report, Rajya TV.
So election-related news now, and top BJP leaders have stepped up their campaign in Jammu and Kashmir. Party chief Amit Shah hit the campaign trail both in the valley as well as in Leh today. Very interestingly, he didn't raise the controversial issue of Article 370 in a direct fashion, but he did call for the complete integration of Jammu and Kashmir with the rest of the country. Home Minister Rajnath Singh, on the other hand, he struck a completely different chord altogether.
In the face of criticism from opposition parties over its stand on Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir, BJP continued its aggressive campaign in the valley on Thursday. Addressing multiple rallies in the state, BJP President Amit Shah said that his party can ensure Jammu and Kashmir's complete integration with the rest of India. His remark comes a day after Rajnath Singh's remark that the controversial article will not be a poll issue in the state.
जम्मू कश्मीर का ये चुनाव जम्मू कश्मीर को देश का एक अभिन्न अंग बनाने के लिए भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है, देश के साथ जुड़ाव के साथ भी बहुत.
Home Minister Rajnath Singh also racked up the issue of Article 370 in Leh, claiming it to be a hurdle to implement several central policies in the valley. BJP leaders also took on the National Conference and Congress for lack of development in the state. He assured thorough probe into the misuse of central funds to the valley.
कभी आर्टिकल 370 का आपको भय दिखाते हैं, कहते हैं बीजेपी आएगी, आर्टिकल 370 को रिपील कर देगी, और इस बार भी यही भय जम्मू कश्मीर और लद्दाख की जनता को दिखाया जा रहा है. बहनों भाइयों, यह असेंबली का चुनाव चल रहा है. असेंबली का चुनाव यदि होना चाहिए तो गुड गवर्नेंस के आधार पर होना चाहिए, डेवलपमेंट के मुद्दे पर होना चाहिए.
60 साल से जम्मू कश्मीर के अंदर ये दो परिवारों का जो शासन बना है, इसी के कारण जम्मू कश्मीर पे हमेशा सवालिया निशान लगा गया.
On Saturday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will launch campaign in the valley. He is expected to address a dozen rallies in yet another whirlwind campaign tour for the assembly polls. Bureau Report, Rajya TV.
Meanwhile, the Congress has accused the NDA of failing in its promise of bringing back black money that's been stashed abroad. Upping the ante on this issue, the Congress also raised doubts about the union government's intentions regarding this issue, also questioning the relaunch of the Kisan Vikas Patra. The Congress also interestingly questioned the State Bank of India's decision to give a $1 billion loan to the Adani Group for the development of a mine in Australia that they acquired a few years ago. The government, for its part, has dismissed those allegations.
स्टेट बैंक से उनका सिर्फ एमओयू हुआ है, कोई लोन नहीं दिया गया. बाकी फाइनेंशियल वायबिलिटी, कमर्शियल वायबिलिटी देख के स्टेट बैंक फैसला करेगा कि किसको लोन देना किसको लोन नहीं देना, ये बैंक स्वयं अपने कमर्शियल फैसले करे। सरकार इसमें न पड़ती है न पड़ेगी।
स्कीम को इसलिए बंद कर दिया गया कि वो स्कीम किसी ना किसी तरीके से मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग को बढ़ावा देती है। वो स्कीम किसी ना किसी तरीके से टेररिज्म को फंड करती है, जो कि भारत सरकार के डिप्टी गवर्नर के रिपोर्ट के अंदर कहा गया। और जिस वजह से इस स्कीम को एबॉलिश किया गया, तो आपने उस स्कीम को वापस क्यों चालू किया?
We're going to take a break here on the program. When we come back, some international stories. And Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa has amended the constitution, hoping to get a record third term. He's called for snap polls, expected sometime middle of January. That story and more when the News Tonight returns. Welcome back. This is the News Tonight. I'm Zaka Jacob. The government is likely to table a crucial legislation for a complete ban on child labour in all sectors. That bill is due to come in the winter session of the Parliament. The proposal is considered significant in curbing the rampant spread of child labour across the country. Now, though the proposal for a complete ban on all forms of child labour up to the age of 14 was cleared by the Union Cabinet back in 2012, it's been pending in the Rajya Sabha ever since.
Kailash Satyarthi might have won the Nobel Peace Prize this year, but on his home turf, the picture regarding child labour remains grim. However, the government is planning to change all that by imposing a complete ban on child labour. A planned legislation aims to amend the Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986 to bring it in sync with the Right to Education Act.
We are also very serious, and we want to take further more steps to eradicate the child labour, and whatever the laws have been made, that should be strictly implemented.
Under existing laws, child labour is not a punishable offence in some non-hazardous sectors such as farming. The new proposal aims to ban all work for children under the age of 14 and restrict non-hazardous work to adolescents between the age of 14 and 18. Employing a child under 14 will be a cognizable offence punishable with imprisonment up to 2 years or a fine up to Rs 50,000 or both, an increase from the current 1-year jail or Rs 20,000. Repeat offenders can be imprisoned for up to 3 years.
Is that we have laws, but then they are not implemented. So we need to make sure that there are very clear anti-child labour plans in every state.
Official figures indicate there are over 12 million child workers in India. UNICEF estimates that India has the highest number of labourers under the age of 14 in the world, while sub-Saharan African countries have the highest percentage of children who are deployed as child labour. India has been talking about abolishing child labour in seminars, in Parliament, by the NGOs. But it is important to bring a legislation that not only completely curbs child labour, but also focuses on the rehabilitation of rescued children. Reporting from Delhi, Kriti Mishra for Rajya Sabha Television.
Talking about people who've been punished for no fault of theirs, the 5 fishermen who were pardoned by the Sri Lankan government have now returned to India. They were serving a death sentence up until yesterday in a drug smuggling case. They landed in Delhi, from where they were taken to an undisclosed location. They're likely to fly to Chennai later tonight. The fishermen were released a few days after Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa, where the two agreed on the transfer of fishermen to an Indian jail. Now, this case dates back to 2011, when the 5 fishermen set out from Rameshwaram and were apprehended by the Sri Lankan Navy on the charge of possessing narcotics. All the other national stories coming up in Nationwide. The CBI today carried out fresh search operations in Kolkata in connection with the multi-crore Sharda chit fund scam. The searches were carried out in the Sharda Group offices in 3 different locations in the city. The operation was launched on the basis of an FIR against the suspended Trinamool Congress MP Kunal Ghosh. A fire broke out at the Uri Power project in Baramulla today. A fault in the transformer is believed to be the cause of the fire. The project was inaugurated by Prime Minister Modi just a few months ago. No reports of any injury has been reported in this case so far. The man who fired upon the Aurobindo Farmers Vice Chairman K. Nityananda Reddy has been identified. The suspect is a police constable who tried to kidnap Reddy. This was in Hyderabad Wednesday. He opened fire at an executive using an AK-47 rifle, all in a bid to kidnap this business executive. According to the police, he planned to extort money from Reddy along with 3 others. Less than a week before the assembly polls, large parts of Jammu and Kashmir are facing a huge dip in temperatures. Mercury has gone below the freezing point in many places. Dense fog and harsh weather conditions are likely to continue through the next week when the state goes to polls. Just a week to go before the SARC summit, and Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has ruled out any bilateral talks with India without first talking to Kashmiri separatists. Now, these remarks are a direct snub to India's stand. The centre had called off a bilateral meeting, in fact, the Foreign Secretary level meeting last August, after the Pakistan High Commissioner here in Delhi ignored India's warning on meetings with separatists. However, Prime Minister Sharif's views were opposed by leaders back home.
After raking up Kashmir issue at the UN General Assembly, Pakistan has stepped up pressure on India to resume bilateral dialogue process. This time, Islamabad has set its own conditions. Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif wants talks with Kashmiri separatists first before resuming dialogue. It's a direct snub to India's stand. It's a rebuff to India's decision to call off secretary-level meet in August when Pakistani envoy Abdul Basit met separatists despite centre's opposition. Sharif blamed India for the cancellation of talks, claiming Islamabad initiated the dialogue process. Sharif and Prime Minister Modi will cross each other's path at the SARC summit in less than a week. But his remark has ruled out any chances of a meeting on the sidelines of the summit.
Obviously, during the summit and during the retreat, leaders do interact. With reference to your question about a bilateral meeting with India, no, I don't have anything to share with you.
Sharif's views were rejected by political parties back home.
कश्मीर भारत का अभिन्न अंग है और नवाज शरीफ साहब को ये मालूम होना चाहिए कि उस पर कोई चर्चा नहीं हो सकती। पूरी तरह से भारत ने आज नहीं अनेक बार अपना पक्ष रख दिया है। भारत के पार्लियामेंट का ये प्रस्ताव है, बल्कि जो पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर है उस पर भी हमारा अधिकार है।
Pakistan should understand that without India's stand, no issue can be decided in Kashmir, and Kashmir problem can be resolved only in a bilateral dialogue with India government and the Pakistan government.
At a time when the two countries are going through a diplomatic freeze, Sharif's remark could worsen chances of revival in talks any soon. Bureau Report, Sabha TV.
Diplomatic freeze, yes, between India and Pakistan. Possible diplomatic thaw between India and Sri Lanka with the release of the 5 fishermen from Tamil Nadu. But now there's a story that's concerning domestic Sri Lankan politics, and in a very interesting way, President Mahinda Rajapaksa today declared a snap presidential poll. He's going to seek a record and unprecedented third term. His proclamation to seek re-election was issued today at an auspicious hour. A message on Rajapaksa's Twitter account said that he had signed the proclamation declaring his intention to hold a presidential election seeking another term. Remember, the president had to amend the constitution to enable him to seek a third term. He became eligible to call an election just yesterday after completing the mandatory 4 years in his second term. The Election Commissioner Mahinda Deshapriya's office said that the presidential proclamation has been received and due nominations procedure would follow. The election is speculated to be held sometime in early January. An opposition candidate, we believe, will be announced soon. More international stories, and 6 world powers are meeting in the Austrian capital Vienna today, hoping to clinch a final agreement on the controversial Iranian nuclear deal. US Secretary of State John Kerry will join the talks later tonight. He's expected to make a last-minute attempt to try and reach an agreement by a deadline Monday. Iran and the 6 global powers, that's the United States, Britain, France, China, Russia and Germany, began their final talks in Vienna Tuesday. Yesterday, Iran held several closed-door meetings, including 2 with the United States. Iran and the P5+1 group reached an interim deal back in November of 2013 to stop Tehran's nuclear program in exchange for the limited easing of sanctions. However, they failed to narrow down the gaps on core issues during 6 months of negotiations for a comprehensive nuclear deal. All right, more international stories coming up in Global Buzz. A suspected gunman who went on a rampage at the Florida State University campus was killed by 3 cops. 3 people were wounded in the shooting. 2 of the victims were taken to a local hospital. One of them is said to be critical. At least 8 people were reported dead in New York as a massive snowstorm continues to wreak havoc across the United States. The Weather Department has warned of more severe cyclonic storms in the next few days. Freezing temperatures have continued in many parts of the US. There's been heavy disruption to travel, particularly air travel. It's expected to turn milder through the weekend with a rapid thaw warning fresh flash floods. The Miss World contestant of Honduras and her sister were found shot dead ahead of the pageant in London. A suspect has confessed that he killed Maria Jose Alvarado and her sister in a fit of jealousy. Alvarado was to fly to London this week to compete in the pageant. All right, we're going to take a break here in the program. When we come back, all the sports stories. And it is the Game 9 in the World Chess Championship between Vishwanathan Anand and Magnus Carlsen. We'll get you the details. Anand, of course, desperate for a win. Details when the News Tonight returns. Welcome back to the News Tonight. Time now for some sports stories. Vishwanathan Anand and Magnus Carlsen have drawn the 9th game in the World Chess Championship. Carlsen now leads 5-4. The two players will play 3 more games and Anand needs to win all 3. A draw in all 3 of those games will help Carlsen retain the World Championship. Anand played the 9th game with black pieces, which is considered a disadvantage. He will open the 10th game with white pieces. That game is due Friday. More sports news in Sportsbeat. It's good news for F1 fans here in India. The Indian Grand Prix is expected to return in 2016. Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone said he's confident that all the issues will be sorted out in due course of time, referring to a fruitful meeting with the race's promoters last month. The Indian Grand Prix was dropped from the 2014 calendar year after 3 successful seasons owing to tax and bureaucratic hurdles. Kidambi Srikanth continued his giant killing spree while Saina Nehwal hardly broke a sweat to advance to the pre-quarterfinals of the Hong Kong Super Series. Srikanth shocked the 7th-seed Chou Tien-chen of Chinese Taipei 18-21, 22-20, 21-16. This was in the men's singles campaign opener. Saina, on the other hand, needed just 27 minutes to beat her unseeded American opponent 21-17, 21-11. India has once again retained the top spot in the latest one-day team rankings. India leads the rankings with 117 points, followed by Australia and South Africa. Indian batsman Virat Kohli also maintained his 2nd place in batting behind South Africa's A.B. de Villiers. Seamer Bhuvneshwar Kumar is the best-placed Indian bowler at 8th position. And that's a wrap of the News Tonight, this Thursday edition. From me, Zaka Jacob, and the rest of the team, thanks for your time. We'll catch you again tomorrow night, same time. Good night.